Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. It's time for some more scary stories. Now, these aren't really the type of ghost stories you would tell around the campfire, but they're all going to revolve around the theme, what was your scariest, a second later I would have died moment. So outside my college dorm, my freshman year, there was this stoop that was half under the building, half out from under it. The building was 18 stories tall. So I'm sitting out there, sitting on the steps, not under the building, and I get up for no real reason and walk under the building. As soon as I get under the building, a huge sheet of glass falls right where I was sitting. Some idiots were messing around on the 11th floor and knocked a 10x9 window pane out of its mooring. I hope you like near-death experience stories because that's what we've got tonight. I passed out at work and came around in a hospital. They diagnosed a bleed on my brain and eventually decided to drill a hole in my skull to drain the fluid. Just as they were about to put me under, the phone rang. It was the head of neurology. I actually had a burst aneurysm. According to my doctor, I would have probably been dead seconds after they started the surgery. Yeah, it's kind of scary knowing that you might die just from getting the wrong surgery. I did some volunteering abroad in a place that had a ton of feral street dogs. Usually they minded their own business and were easily scared away. I tended to carry a piece of rebar in my backpack for this purpose. But occasionally they would gang up and maul people, generally kids and old people. One night I got woken up by the sound of a bunch of them barking and howling. I wouldn't have minded, except I also heard the sound of a woman screaming. I ran out into the street to check it out, turned a corner, and saw the biggest freaking pack of them I'd ever seen, like 30 dogs, all circling around this lady. I started yelling and throwing rocks, thinking they'd scatter, which is when the whole pack immediately turned their attention towards me. They were coming at me with their teeth bared and their ears back, and I remember being really intensely aware of the thought, okay, I'm gonna freaking die right now. It was at that moment that a dude in a rickshaw came tearing down the road, flashing his lights and honking. This made the dogs bolt. The driver saved my life, or at the very least prevented a wicked bad mauling. It was a great affirmation about how most people will do what they can to help you when you need it. Man, this sounds more like a scary story for the cat behind me. I gotta be honest, ever since having my own cat and having to protect her from dogs, it's kinda made me not really like dogs very much anymore. I would hate trying to deal with feral street dogs all the time. I was working on a pipe crew in 1998. We were installing a large concrete vault in a pretty big hole. I'm standing in a ditch about 6 feet deep, marking grade, while the excavator operator is digging. So to the front of me is a large excavator bucket, itself weighing hundreds of pounds, and backed by powerful hydraulics and thousands of pounds of street armature. And behind me is a solid concrete wall about a foot thick. And the ditch is only a few feet wide and too tall for me to jump or climb out of with any kind of speed. Suddenly, the excavator spins to one side, and the arm snaps out of full extension with full force, and the operator shuts it down. The bucket missed my head by about a foot. He climbs out of the machine, visibly shaken, and tells me that something has failed on the machine and that the arm wasn't supposed to have done that. So as he's been digging, he's been noticing that ever so slightly there's a bit of delay between his inputs and the machine's actions, and in the moment before failure he just felt something wasn't right, and tried to pull the bucket in. When it didn't seem to want to, he turned the excavator, just in case, and that's when the arm extended. If he had not, I would have been crushed to freaking death. There were 2 other excavator operators on that crew, and they were basically idiots. Had one of them been with us that day, I'm sure I'd be dead. You know, I'm pretty okay taking a job with less pay if it means I don't have to deal with, almost dying on a regular basis. I don't think that the mortality rate for narrators is very high. On the 16th of December, 2004, I was with a friend having a beer in a bar on the Khao San Road in Bangkok, Thailand. It was the last week of my bumming round the world, and we had a decision to make. Do we go home for Christmas, or spend it on the beach in Phuket? Neither of us had been to Phuket, and we thought it would be an awesome end to living out of a backpack for the last 18 months. But on the other hand, Christmas at home with the family was also appealing. So we flipped a coin and went home to the UK. Flipping that coin a second earlier or later could have sent us into the path of the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. And see, you missed out, you could have had some crazy stories to tell. My friend and I were taking an elevator down to the cafeteria in our dorm in college. For some reason, we were arguing about something when the doors opened, so we hung back for a second. The elevator then dropped 2 floors, with the doors open. I still hate getting in and out of elevators, and I do a weird running start every time. This happened in Canada, and it was an old building back in the 1950s. We were in the elevator when it dropped, more terrified of the getting sliced in half aspect than the drop. Yeah, I've seen those videos of people who get halfway stuck in the elevator as it starts moving again, and they're not very pretty. When I was in middle school, I called my mom on my cell phone during lunch because my head hurt so badly I couldn't move. Well, the nurse came and brought me to the office for a checkup and some pain pills while I waited for my mom. We didn't live close. Nurse said no fever, and to take me home and put me to bed. My mom watched me get into the truck and decided that maybe we should go to the hospital to be safe. By the time we reached the hospital, my temp was at 104 and I was incapacitated. I had meningitis. If we were at home and she put me to bed like the nurse suggested, I never would have woken up. You know, it's kind of a painful dilemma when you run into stuff like this. I mean, some people would just suggest anytime you feel any kind of pain or any kind of sickness, just rush to the hospital right away. But you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Do I waste a whole bunch of time and money going to the hospital when it might just be nothing? Or do I risk staying home when it could kill me? So, sometimes our bodies don't really tell us what we need to know. I was walking into a Miller's Outpost, and the M from the sign above the store fell down and hit me on the shoulder. It was a big glass sign. One moment sooner and it hits my head. Because it drew blood, the store offered to give me any item I wanted so I couldn't sue. I chose an awful red cardigan. I was 16 and dumb. That's such a weird situation. It's like, well, I did almost die, but at least I got a free shirt out of it. When I was about 9 or 10, I was in the basement helping my grandma do laundry. She had a big braided rug on the floor, and I was bouncing all over the place. I was wearing socks and jumping on and off the rug. She bends over to get something out of the dryer and reaches across the rug to grab something. I realize what she's reaching for is a snake, just inches between the two of us. I yell at her to stop. We both scream, and the snake quickly takes on an aggressive posture. I run outside and grab a broom, and my grandma starts beating the poor thing to death with it. Grandpa hears the commotion and rushes down and delivers the fatal blow. Turns out that little nope rope that snuck into the house was a venomous copperhead. Yeah, luckily I don't live in a place where snakes are very common. However, I do get very worried anytime I spot like a black widow around the house. 'Cause you never know what might happen with those things. A couple months ago, I was in a head-on collision with some dude on crack driving down the wrong side of the road with his headlights out. I was going probably around 50 before I saw him. The speed limit was 55, so that's my best guess. I saw him with a second or two of reaction time, managed to brake hard and swerve over only bad enough to total my car, but I still walked away with nothing more than a sore neck. If I hadn't seen the dude, I don't doubt that I could have died or been seriously injured. You know, when you really think about it, it's kind of weird that we spend so much time driving. You know, it's just a benign little thing that you do daily just to get from one place to another. Whereas occasionally, you know, it might just be the end of you, just out of nowhere. No warning or anything, it's just, well, I guess your life's over now. When I was in junior high, I was carpooling with another kid and her mom. For a reason I can't fathom, she decided to race a transit train, hoping to get across the tracks before the train stopped traffic. She gunned the car. I was in the back seat screaming no. She hit the train. Because I was in the back seat, I was injured the least. I had a pointy piece of metal pierce through my jeans and flesh until it hit bone. Had she been a second faster, that train would have hit us broadside and killed us all. This was 1980. She was not charged or sued. It was labeled an accident. She and her daughter suffered broken bones, lacerations, and concussions. Because of the parental acrimony, I couldn't be friends with the girl anymore. The family moved away before the end of the school year. I know at the time her mom was still not working. I'm not sure if she ever went back to work. Clearly she had developed some kind of mental or emotional problem, which the accident probably made worse. I wondered if she was an alcoholic who began day drinking, but I never mentioned my suspicion to anyone. I needed crutches for a few months. Man, the only time you should try and race a train while you're driving is if you're playing Mario Kart 64, because nobody wants to sit and wait for that train. I went to a corner store for a drink. Literally 2 minutes after I left, someone robbed it and shot the cashier and another person in the store. Well, that's why it's you telling this story, not somebody else. About 30 years ago, my family and I were driving up to Jasper, Alberta in the winter. There was a slow car in front of us, and an impatient one behind us who kept trying to pass. Eventually, the car behind us did pass, on a blind corner, and hit a logging truck head-on. The slow car in front of us was also hit, but my dad managed to put us in the shoulder and not in the collision. This was before mobile phones or anything like that, so I remember my dad and older brother getting out and going over the other cars, and talking with the truck driver. It was this indescribable moment of total silence, and freezing cold, and disbelief until the authorities came, quite a bit later. I remember sitting in the back seat with my younger brothers, wondering what the heck just happened. Yeah, I've seen people do this. It's so stupid when people just get so impatient that they'll just pass, even when they have no visibility of who might be coming the other way. I cannot confirm whether this would have been death. However, it would have changed my and my parents' life like death. I was about 6 or 7, and I went along with my mom to go train the new puppy we had. The training ground was quite far away from home, and I remember that it was a big field surrounded by a forest, and a motorway on the side of it. I was told to stay in the car and play on my Game Boy. After an hour or so, I got bored, and I went to have a look at where my mom was with our puppy. The car park was a little while from the training ground, but I decided to walk towards her anyway. In the meantime, an older man, 30-ish, starts talking to me, and the naive little boy I was talked back, regardless of all the times my mom told me not to talk to strangers. He convinced me I was going the wrong way, and told me he would take me to my mom and the puppy. We ended up by the motorway side, and we were about to walk down the bank to the side of the motorway where his car was parked. As I am about to disappear down the bank, I hear the loudest scream of my name coming from my mom. I look back and feel the grip of the man tighten on my hand, but I was just in time to get my hand out of his grip and run towards my mother. My mom runs past me to see where this guy is, and he had just gotten in his car and drove off. To this day, I still imagine about the what-if scenario and how close I was to being kidnapped and potentially killed. Just remember, kids, don't talk to strangers, even though probably less than 1% of my audience is actually kids. My dad and I were driving down the road after heavy rainfall in Vermont. He is driving, and I'm fiddling with the radio. I hear a very loud crack, and before I can ask my dad what it was, out of the corner of my eye I see movement. An entire tree was falling on the road, due to the heavy rainfall. The dirt was too wet to keep some trees in place. My dad stood on his brake, cartoon style, and we slid nearly right into the tree. I heard a pop before we fully stopped, and when we lurched back to 0 miles an hour, we were both breathing hard. My dad got out to check the damage, and the pop I hear was a branch hitting a headlight out. First time I've ever seen my dad call 911. It was scary. Could have been the end of us if he didn't stop to chat to the waitress after we left the restaurant to go home. Yeah, it's always crazy to think about all these butterfly effects things. Because when you're going about your daily life, minutes don't really matter, even hours don't even matter sometimes. But then when you're like in a very heated moment, like every split second matters. So it's really crazy to just think back to like your previous few hours where you weren't really paying attention to what was going on, and all of that led up to where you ended up at that moment. My family and I were driving down the highway when we see a stopped SUV in the middle of the highway with a family of 6 inside, and the car in front of us didn't get out of the way until the last second. Oh yeah, that's messed up when you see that kind of thing, where there's just a car in the middle of the freeway. Yeah, that gets super dangerous. When I was 5 or 6, we were on holidays in Australia. My mother took me to the beach that is known because it's safe, thanks to a net system that doesn't let the sharks in. Well, when we arrived, the beach was empty. What was kinda strange. But we continued to have a beach day, and we had a bath. My mother even swam from one point to another. After that, we were going to the car, and some authorities saw us. They told us not to enter the beach because a family of alligators had entered in the water, and it was really dangerous. Well, somebody probably said, "See you later, alligator," because they didn't seem to be a big problem right here. I was a freshman in college and came back to my hometown for a fall break. I decided to go to a football game to hang out with some old friends. On the way home, I stopped at a red light, and when it turned green, I pulled forward, as usual. From the left, a truck suddenly hit me. He was speeding and ran the red light, T-boned me right in front of my driver door. I luckily got out with just an injured knee and fractured clavicle and some bruising. It haunted me for a while that, had I pulled forward just a little faster, or he had been just a quarter second slower, he would have gone straight into my driver's door, and I likely wouldn't have made it. He wasn't even drunk or under the influence. It was just a 16-year-old kid not paying attention. The scariest kind. This actually reminds me of one of my closest near-death experiences. So about 6 years ago now, I was just working a low-wage cashiering job where I would ride my bike to work every morning. Well, of course I'd have to ride through a lot of traffic where people weren't really paying much attention to bikers that were anywhere. So I almost got hit plenty of times. But the one time that really stood out to me was I was just sitting at an intersection, waiting for the crosswalk so that I could cross, So I'm waiting at the light, I hit the button, and then I look up and it says, "Oh, it's green, I can start going now." So I start going, and then this car that was basically trying to race the light, but way afterwards, just comes flying towards me and just slams on its brake, stops in the middle of the intersection, and I'm just like, I just give this terrified look as I just finish crossing the street. And then I went into work and I put in my notice and said, "I'm not risking my life for a cashiering job anymore, so see ya." But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed these scary stories. I mean, it's kind of hard to really call these like scary stories because, they're kind of different. But since I'm going to be doing a different style of scary stories every weekend for the next couple months, we're going to have some variety. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. So thanks for watching. And we'll have a live stream sometime tomorrow. I will make a post about it to let you know what time.